may be lots of questions, I'm going to go ahead and jump in. Um, I'm so glad to see all of you today. Thanks so much for joining this information session. If I haven't met you, I am Judith Smith, and I am the director of the New York City Workforce Funders Collaborative. I'm going to share a quick agenda and then jump into a very brief presentation so we can get to Q&A. Today's agenda includes a brief introduction to this group, what this collaborative is all about. I'm going to share a little bit about our new middle wage focus and the research that we've conducted so far that informs this RFP. And then we're going to go over the RFP in some depth. And then we'll have time for Q&A. So I also just wanted to mention there are some links in the chat, and I will be providing additional links in the chat when we're done. Please hold your questions to the end. I'm going to go as quickly as possible through this introduction. So for those who don't know much about the New York City Workforce Funders Collaborative, we are a 25-year-old collaborative. We were established in 2001 to promote robust, coherent, and effective workforce development systems for low-income New Yorkers. We are housed by the New York Community Trust and led by, right now, 12 to 13 foundations. It fluctuates. And over our 25-year history, our funds have supported public-private initiatives, demonstration projects, capacity building, especially for the nonprofit sector, and policy research and advocacy. We also play a field building role. We convene the broader field of funders. There's over 40 foundations that invest in workforce development in the city. They invest a lot of money in workforce development in the city. It's about $92 million a year. We convene that group every quarter, and those meetings include a lot of you and leaders from your respective organizations, stakeholders from across the workforce sector. And I want to just kind of double down here and explain that we really are a systems-focused collaborative. Our focus is on the systems, which we're going to name in a minute, and not individual pathways, not individual programs. We're thinking about the systems, the pathways and programs sit inside, because we think the broader systems are fragmented, they're disconnected, and they're not as effective as they could be. So that's the kind of sweet spot of this group. Here are our current members. All of this is also on our website, and it's included in the RFP as well. These will be very familiar to anyone who has raised money from workforce funders. And a lot of them have actually been around for our full 25-year history. Some notable grants to give you some examples of what we have funded: public-private partnerships. So we were the seed funders of the city's industry partnerships, which still exist. We have been longtime supporters of system-wide strategies at CUNY, including what used to be called career success and is now inclusive economy. We have done, and we will continue to do capacity building in various forums for the field, typically of nonprofits, the field of nonprofits, but other forms of capacity building as well. Some examples: when New York State changed its funding structure a few years ago, we stood up a boot camp and also a match fund for New York City nonprofits to be more competitive for that funding. And an AI learning lab for workforce nonprofits. In terms of research and advocacy, not something a lot of funders fund, but that we do. Some of that work includes economic analysis and labor market tracking, especially during the pandemic. And then various forms of workforce advocacy, especially looking at low-wage workforces, including childcare, social services, and frontline healthcare workforce. So to mark our 25th year, we thought long and hard about what our focus should be. We talked to partners from across the sector. We talked to leaders and experts, not just in New York City, and we landed on middle wage occupations and upskilling as an urgent priority. I don't have to tell any of you that the city is increasingly unaffordable. We see poverty rising. We are watching a labor market change rapidly in a completely unpredictable way, right? All this is all some things that we think about every day, including everyone on this Zoom. And we think that while entry-level employment, the stability of a first job is profoundly important and must continue to be a core responsibility of the workforce system or the sector. We think we must expand pathways to real economic mobility. We have to think about advancement. We have to think about not just the entry-level job, but a true career path. And that's why we landed on middle wage as a goal. We want to help the entire sector develop a data-informed understanding of which middle wage occupations are accessible across industries and what it will take to prepare and support low-income New Yorkers to reach those occupations. We think this is it will require programmatic and policy solutions, and it will not be just us who achieves this. This is really will need to be a collective effort, not just on the part of philanthropy, but of course our leaders from across government, nonprofits, educational institutions, et cetera. So just to explain that in order to develop this understanding of what we even mean by middle wage, we have launched a 4-phase research effort to build not just our understanding, but the entire sectors or the entire ecosystem's understanding of what we mean and where these occupations could be. So in the first phase, we worked to define middle wage, a middle wage range for New York City. In the second phase, we looked at where those occupations are. The third phase is going to look at all of the systems to understand any alignment with this middle wage goal. And the fourth phase is policy recommendations that tie to this middle wage strategy. We worked with the Center for New York City Affairs, a longtime partner, to analyze cost of living frameworks and define this middle wage range. The Center for New York City Affairs team did a tremendous job looking at all kinds of frameworks and thinking about what is what is an ambitious but also realistic goal for the workforce sector. And this is where we landed. This is the wage range. Depending on who you're talking to, some people feel that this is very modest. And if you really look at the cost of living, we could bump this higher. A lot of other folks feel like this is tremendously ambitious for a wage range. And so we're kind of striking a middle ground here. We're thinking about roles that maybe sit just outside and move into this range. We are thinking about all forms of advancement. And we hope this sparks everyone else in the sector to also think about the pathways and the advancement from where we are now and the kinds of occupations we're helping people to secure now into this wage band. Then we worked with the Burning Glass Institute to assess middle wage occupations in New York City and to think about prioritizing them across, they use 9 dimensions. It's a prioritization framework. It's kind of a directional rather than a prescriptive framework. And the occupations that score high across these dimensions are jobs that mobilize. And this is a jobs that mobilize is a Burning Glass framework that they've used in other places. And they have developed a dashboard that summarizes all of this research and allows all of you to play around with it, look at each occupation in detail, and look at the framework in more detail. So now I'm going to go into a little bit of an intro on the RFP. Everything I'm going to share is in the document. Again, I will put all links in the chat when we're done, when we open it up for Q&A. But everything in here you will find in the document, which is probably how you registered for this session. So I hope none of this is super unfamiliar to you. But our request for proposals is tied to this new strategic focus, where we are inviting proposals for system and pathway models and for policy and advocacy efforts that expand access to middle wage occupations and upskilling opportunities for low-income New Yorkers. Proposals may be submitted by a single organization. We are also longstanding funders of coalitions. So it's also valid for a coalition of organizations that are working together to apply with one organization serving as the lead. This is how we are currently thinking about New York City's workforce systems. We think the public workforce agencies are one system. The CUNY community college system is another system. The field of nonprofits represents yet another system. The field of labor unions, its own system. There are different kinds of industry partnership models here. I think you're all familiar with that. So we are considering those also to be their own system, and New York City public schools. So under system and pathway models, the collaborative will award up to $500,000 for projects that build the capacity of a New York City workforce development system, one of the ones I just mentioned, to connect low-income New Yorkers to a middle wage occupation or a group of occupations. And this is per grant, so up to $500,000 per grant. We believe competitive submissions will strengthen or expand training pathways to middle wage occupations, strengthen or expand advancement models that help workers secure middle wage positions, and or address structural barriers to effective middle wage pathways for low-income New Yorkers. Under this category, the collaborative will prioritize projects that move one or more of the city's workforce development systems, the ones I just named, benefit multiple organizations, directly target occupations with high jobs that mobilize scores on the framework, the dashboard framework, or more broadly, just those 9 dimensions, to give you a sense of the way we're thinking about prioritizing. It's all in that framework. Leverage existing program infrastructure, partnerships, and funding. Connect 2 or more workforce development systems, or strengthen cross-system collaboration, and are designed with or informed by industry partnerships that could include industry associations or industry intermediaries, and also include strong partnerships with industry. The collaborative is not supporting, through this RFP, programming at a single organization. That is not something we typically would do if it's, direct service. You didn't see that among the grant examples for a reason. That's not our focus as a systems-focused collaborative. Direct services that are part of a proposal that would support fewer than 300 participants would fall outside the scope of this RFP, and also general staff training and professional development. Under the policy and advocacy strand, the collaborative will award grants of up to $200,000 each for policy and advocacy efforts that increase the share of New York City's middle wage occupations, expand access to middle wage occupations for low-income New Yorkers, with a focus on reducing structural barriers to entry and advancement. This includes advocacy to increase public investments in pathways to middle wage occupations, develop and or advance public policy solutions to support reskilling and upskilling for workers who have experienced labor market disruption, and or implement concrete reforms to the city's workforce systems that facilitate new or improved solutions to move more New Yorkers into middle wage occupations. Outside the scope of this RFP, lobbying and projects that are focused exclusively on research that don't have a component that moves that research into action in some way. Submission eligibility. Organizations are limited to one submission as lead applicant, but you may serve as a partner on your peers' proposals. So one as the lead. The entity that is submitting must be a 501c3 public charity or an unincorporated coalition using a funds administrator. The work that is proposed must be designed to benefit low-income workers and job seekers in the 5 boroughs of New York City. We are focused on New York City, where New York City is in our name. And if the work is not concentrated here, it's not eligible. Now I'm going to go through the submission materials. This, I would encourage you to look back at the document, but I've included everything here. We are asking for a project narrative, no longer than 5 pages. In addition, that's 5 pages just for the narrative. And then in addition, an itemized project budget, an itemized organizational budget, and a board list. The project narrative, again, I encourage you to go back to the document because this is pretty involved here, but I'm going to read it all out. We are interested in the lead organization's mission, history, and record of accomplishment. We'd like to know more about the key stakeholders. So under system and pathway models, the project and industry partners and their respective roles and responsibilities. For policy and advocacy, we'd like to know more about the policymakers or other entities to be engaged. So that could mean state or city agencies or leaders, employer associations, etc. We need a project description that includes the primary goals and activities, your central learning questions. We are a learning kind of R&D collaborative. So we are hoping you will have a learning question that kind of guides the work. We're very curious about that. A timeline of major project milestones, specific and measurable project outputs, including participant outcomes, if you have direct service as part of the project, to be achieved during the grant period, and a plan for tracking these outputs and outcomes. Workforce systems to be targeted, and the intended systemic or structural change resulting from the project. An overview of the scale and outcomes of existing programs, partnerships, or funding to be leveraged. A profile of target middle wage occupations, including the jobs that mobilize score, if it happens to be an occupation in the dashboard or an occupational assessment that uses the burning glass framework, those 9 dimensions. And finally, a plan for sustaining the project beyond the grant period. Okay, so the itemized project budget should list the full project expenses, the amount requested, and the funding sources. For each funding source, it would need to see whether it is pending or secured. If you have a coalition or multi-partner project, it's helpful for us to see expenses and revenue associated with each partner. We need to see the lead organization's itemized annual operating budget and the lead organization's board of directors and their professional affiliations. So the New York Community Trust and the collaborative, we require boards to have at least 4 independent members. All board members should be unrelated, and no more than 1 board member should be a paid staff member. If you have questions about that, I'm going to share my email. We can talk about it. Submission instructions. So all of those materials should be combined into one PDF. You can save it using your organization name to make it easier for us. Then you'll go to the grant seeker portal on the New York Community Trust website. There's an apply here tab at the bottom. When you go to the next page, you're going to see additional funding opportunities listed, and you're going to see our RFP, expanding access to middle wage occupations. And that will allow you to apply using the link that's next to that RFP. It's going to ask you for a cover sheet, which is just basic organizational information. And at the end of that, you'll upload your PDF. Our deadline is Thursday, August 20th at 5 p.m. In terms of grant awards, we will be announcing these grants in the fall. Funded projects must begin by January. We are expecting to award up to 5 grants in total under system and pathways models. As I said, we're going to award grants of up to $500,000 each. Ideally for terms of 12 to 18 months. Under policy and advocacy, we're giving you a longer runway because policy and advocacy take a little longer sometimes. So we're giving you a runway of 18 months. And the grants are capped at $200,000 for those. So just a disclaimer at the end here, awards may vary from what is requested, and a submission, of course, does not guarantee funding. We have an extensive evaluation process, and that usually triggers a request for additional information or a conversation before a grant is made. Here, I'm adding these mainly for those who are going to watch the recording afterward. I'm going to put all of these in the chat, a link to the dashboard, a link to the portal, and my email if you have any questions or want to talk through your proposal. And now we're going to just open it up for Q&A.